Hey everyone, it's Charlie from Board Game Fields, and today we're going to talk about the best two-player only games that you can play. I'm talking this is great for couples, or maybe your board game group is a little smaller and you can only play with two people. This will be the list for you. Okay, but before we get started with the list, I'm going to ask that you please like and subscribe because it really helps out the channel and might help someone else find games that they're looking for. So, a caveat for this list, I'm only talking about two-player only games or games that feature two-player only modes. Now, there's plenty of games out there that play higher player counts that still play good at two players, but we're not focusing on them today. Okay, let's get to the list. This is Wingspan Asia. And just like the original game, you'll be doing one of the four main actions on your player board. You'll be either playing birds into rows for points to make some sweet combos, and each bird's brown ability will trigger when you play a bird in the same habitat. You can also gain food from the bird feeder so you can play more birds, or you can draw additional bird cards from the row or the top of the deck. And lastly, you can lay eggs for points. Now let's focus on what this standalone two-player game has added. So aside from the new cards, which can be used as an expansion for the original Wingspan, they've added this board for two players. And the way this works is when you play a bird card, you get to place a duet token on the map that matches the bird you played. Matches means it has to be in the same habitat and have one of its symbols or resource cost. This adds a ton to the game as now you're vying for control over this board, because at the end of each round, you'll score bonuses based on the board, and at the end of the game, you'll score 1 point per token for your largest group of connected duet tokens. So that is how Wingspan Asia feels. And wow, what a great duet mode they have in this game. That map in the middle is fantastic and really adds a lot and that little extra spice from the original Wingspan. Once you play a bird card and you getting to place out those duet tokens really helps not only in the short term with a benefit, but in the long term for in-game goals. And that adds a lot to the game because normally towards the end of the game in a regular Wingspan, you're probably just laying eggs or trying to find birds to play that have high point values. But with this, you know you have the end round which could relate to that duet board, or at the very end of the game, you get points per contiguous duet token on the board. That's huge and really adds a lot to the game. So not only are you just getting regular Wingspan, you're getting this mode that's really curtailed to two players going back and forth. And that feels awesome because there's times where my opponent might play a bird card in a certain habitat, let's say like the water, and I know, oh, he only played that because he wants to play this duet token on the board. And I'm like, man, I really should make sure I can either block him or make sure my contiguous duet tokens are longer. So it's a really cool vibe that you don't experience in regular Wingspans. And I think it's a great game for couples, and that's why it's on my list, Wingspan Asia. Okay, next up on my list is Duelosaur Island. I'm telling you, this is the hidden gem, the secret of two-player games that not enough people talk about. This game is awesome. Let me show you how it plays. Duelosaur Island is essentially Jurassic Park in a box. On your turn, you're going to be drawing and rolling these dice, and look at them. It's definitely reminiscent of the amber that the mosquitoes were in those movies. So you'll go back and forth selecting these dice to collect DNA. And as you go up on these DNA tracks like this, you'll get to create different types of dinosaurs. You'll also hire specialists to help you out and build attractions in your park. And yes, there are some amazing puns. Now the goal is to build the best dinosaur theme park you can with excitement, but watch out for the threat as you build more dinosaurs. The person with the most visitors at the end of the game wins. So Duelosaur Island is in a line of games from Pandasaurus Games. They have Dinosaur Island, Dinosaur World, there's a roll and write version, and they also have this two-player version. And a lot of people talk about those other games and fail to mention Duelosaur Island. I've played all of them, and I'm going to be honest with you, I think this is the best version. There's so much to love. Those dice that are kind of like the mosquitoes and amber, oh my gosh, it's great. You going up the track with these dual layer boards and their inset feels good. I also want to make sure to mention, I love almost the comedy aspect in this game. The park attraction you can build, like Dino Nuggets or Clever Grill. There's some awesome quotes or awesome references from the movie. But even if you don't like the movie, there's some great systems in this game. The excitement versus threat system is great. So if I'm playing a Tyrannosaurus Rex, wow, that's a lot of points. There's no downside. Oh, wait, there is a downside because this Tyrannosaurus Rex has a ton of threats. So I have to make sure I have the security to put it in my park. The choosing of the die on your turn feels phenomenal. So in a round, one player is going to roll those 5 die, and one at a time, you have to choose what perk or benefit you want. And you think, oh, I definitely know what I want, but there's usually 2 or 3 things that you really want. So, ooh, which one does my opponent want? So you can already see the headspace you're getting in. So theme alone is a 10 out of 10 for me. But even if you don't like the theme, the mechanisms in this game are really great, and you're kind of running your own systems. So if you're perhaps a couple or maybe don't like more antagonistic play against opponents, then this is the right game for you. Check it out, Duelosaur Island. In the card game Jaipur, you are trying to become the richest merchant by selling a variety of fine goods and camels. At the start of the game, you're going to be dealt 5 cards, and if you get dealt camels, just always place them in front of you, and that's known as your herd of camels. Now on your turn, it's simple. You can either take or sell cards. To take cards, you look at the market. You can either take one good and replace it with the top card from the deck, or you can take as many cards as you want, but you'll have to exchange it with the exact same number from your hand and or herd of camels. And lastly, you can just take all the camels from the market. So why you want to do this is because of your other option, selling cards to get tokens. When selling, you can choose one type of good from your hand and discard as many as you like. You then get to take as many tokens as cards you discarded matching that color. There's also bonuses that give you extra money, like if you ever sell more than 3 cards or have the most camels. You keep going until 3 types of tokens are depleted, and you win the round if you have the most money. The best 2 out of 3 wins. Okay, so that was Jaipur. I want to first talk about how this is a great introduction game as well. So not only is it for just 2 players, but if you're just getting into the hobby, something like wanting to upgrade from Uno or Candyland or Monopoly, this is a really good one to throw in. It's familiar enough for those family card games that you can bring it to the table and teach it quickly. But what I like is it adds a little bit more strategy. You can try to rush and get certain colors of gems that have the high point values to start, or you can really set yourself up by grabbing a lot of camels so you can grab all these gems and just run through a line and get a lot of points that way. And when you first play the game, you think to yourself, ooh, maybe there's not much to this and I'm relying on luck, but experienced players will beat new players every time. I think the theme's pretty cool. The artwork's great. They actually have a new version they printed within the last few years. This one I show to a ton of new players, as I mentioned at the top, and there's a reason why, because I keep wanting to play it myself and happy to play anytime. That's Jaipur. Founded on the fruitful lands of a bygone monastery, 2 villages have held up the dual tradition of brewing beer and baking bread. As one of these villages, you'll be sharing fields and its resources, finding pride in your friendly rivalry of besting each other's produce. Beer and Bread is a multi-use card game, so on your turn, you'll decide how you want to use the card. Do you want to play it for its resources, gaining the resources on its card and previous cards with those resources? Do you want to produce beer or bread by spending the required resources on the card and sell them for coins? Or lastly, you might decide you want to upgrade your facilities, which will give you a benefit throughout the game or help you with scoring at the end. The game takes place over rounds representing 6 years, which alternate between fruitful and dry years. Now, fruitful years have larger resources in the supply that's available to players and allow you to draft new cards as you switch decks with each turn. Dry years lend less resources in the supply and require you to be sparing and strategic, as you'll use cards played from the previous year to harmonize your duties, deciding what's best for you. In order to win, you must maintain the balance between your baked and liquid goods, because after the 6th year, you'll only score points collected from the type of good for which you earned less, and the village with the highest score wins. All right, so Beer and Bread is maybe the most advanced of all the 2-player games I've mentioned here, and maybe feels the most Euro worker placement-y, and I love that. Let me grab the box again, because this small box packs a giant punch. And I love their in-game scoring in this game, to where you have to choose your lowest value, either beer or bread, and whichever's lower, that's your final score. So you really have to think about it and balance yourself throughout the entire game. You can't be building 3 beer when you have 0 bread, because you know you're going to score bread, and if you have 0 points with bread, you have 0 points total. The other thing that I really like that I didn't really mention in the highlight is if I go over my certain amount of resources that fit in my little house, I have to give it to my opponent. So I also have to balance when I'm playing a card that gives me the resource. Okay, I can get 2 wheat out of this, but I'm giving my friend a barley and a hops. Yeah, we're friends, we're next to the same village, but do I want to do that? The answer is no, I never want to do that. It's also very clever, the mechanic they do too, where a year is either a fruitful or dry year. So on the fruitful years, you're doing these drafts per turn, so I get to see what my opponent has and my opponent gets to see what I have. And then you also have the dry years where, oh, I have to pick up everything I've played and make what I have work. That's a brilliant idea for a 2-player game, that back and forth. Beer and Bread is a new game, but it's highly, highly going up my list, not only for 2-player games, but for games overall. This is Hero Realms, a high fantasy card game that's considered a deck builder, which simply means you start with a certain amount of okay cards, and with these cards, you're trying to buy better cards from a market in the center of the table. So on your turn, you're going to do just that. Try to buy better cards, but you're also attacking your opponent with these red symbols right here. So for an example, that's 5 damage to my opponent. Now what I love about Hero Realms is the replayability. No game ever feels the same. And I guess you could say that's what I like about deck builders in general. You'll have a completely different deck at the end of the game than what you started with. You can play classic fantasy characters like the Healing Cleric or Powerful Wizard. And with the Ancestry expansion, you can play different races like an elf, dwarf, or even an ogre. The goal of the game is to get the other player down to 0 health, and you'll win the game. Okay, that was Hero Realms, and I can't not have a deck builder on my list. Anyone who knows me knows that I love deck builders, that idea of starting out with not so great hand, a crappy hand, let's be honest, and turning it into something fantastic by the end of the game. I love that, and it does a really good job of just being a deck builder. If you've played Star Realms in the past, or any introduction deck builder like DC deck building game or even Marvel Legendary, you'll understand how to play the game right away. But what this game adds is a lot, in my opinion. One, I prefer this fantasy theme over maybe the sci-fi theme, as well as you can pick your class, like a classic fantasy D&D class. You can be a wizard, a ranger, and already at the start of the game, it adds a little bit of spice and makes it different for what you're playing against across the table. I think they've taken what Star Realms did good and made it great. They have more healing in this game, where it doesn't feel as bad that you can just get destroyed and the game's over in 10 minutes. And I feel like there's more variety between what you want to buy, whether do I want to buy mostly to buy more cards, or do I want to buy to fight my opponent? Now, what you saw on the highlight was a giant box, and that's because I have all the expansions like the Ancestry and a co-op mode, but the regular game just comes in a tiny small box, kind of like Jaipur, even smaller, and you get a big game in a small package. So if you're looking for your first deck builder or an advanced card game, I highly, highly recommend Hero Realms, as it's one of my favorite games of all time. Okay, that's it. That's my list for best 2-player games. What do you think? I know you're just yelling at the screen now. How could you forget this game? I didn't, I promise. I made a giant list and I want to keep making more of these lists. I could talk about two-player games forever. So let's discuss it in the comments and talk some two-player games. All right, that's it. I'm Charlie from Board Game Feels. Peace.